Hello Internet, welcome back to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, those who may wish to listen about books, movies, music I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. It's 2026, and in this year I will be doing a new series called Remembering, where I'll be talking about albums that were released 30 years ago. So each month of 2026, I'll talk about at least one album that came out in that month 30 years previously. And today I'm going to be talking about the album Filth Pig by Ministry. I'll talk a little bit about the album, my relationship to it, and whether or not I think it stands up. But before I do that, let me say a little bit about Ministry as a band. The project is the child of a guy called Al Jurgensen, who is a Cuban American musician. When he started out, he was a kind of good looking guy doing synth pop stuff that was kind of influenced by Depeche Mode, or you might think it sounds like very early Talk Talk. If you go to their Bandcamp, you can listen to a compilation that's been around for years that's called 12-inch Singles, 1981 to 1984. This has got a song on it called Every Day is Halloween that's a kind of like goth club classic. But by the end of the 80s, Jurgensen had shifted the band's sound completely to be something much stranger, more absurd, and his aesthetics from the late 80s onwards couldn't be more different to his synth pop aesthetics. He had big dreads, weird goggles on, sort of biker, Mad Max kind of aesthetic. So the albums around the late 80s and the early 90s were kind of early industrial metal, pioneering industrial metal. It's really Ministry and Nine Inch Nails who brought industrial metal into the mainstream, and Ministry's version was quite a playful, absurd form of thrash metal with very fast drum machines and often quite ridiculous lyrics. They had three albums like this, which made their name as a band before they released Filth Pig in 1996, and Filth Pig was completely different. This is the cover of the album. I remember seeing it in a music magazine when it came out and thinking that the album would be quite political. It really isn't. It's a kind of nihilistic, depressive attack on the world, but not in any real political sense. Ministry would release much more political albums later in their career. But it is much more serious than their earlier material. It's quite somber, sad, depressive in its lyrical content, also quite angry. And the music is much slower. It's based around a lot of very crunching riffs, live drums most of the time. There are some drum machines, there are some samples, but there's not a lot of synthesizers. It's like a very heavy, often discordant kind of sludge metal. And at this time, sludge metal was a very new genre. I really don't know who Ministry were influenced by when they made this album. It doesn't sound to me like it's based on the Melvins. I think maybe they were influenced by Godflesh and maybe by I Hate God. It's a kind of dirty, ugly sound that at the same time is quite exhilarating, quite exciting. Al Jurgensen's vocals across the record are kind of rasping, shouting, not exactly screaming, but vocal fry. There's often a lot of distortion on them, flanger on them. Not very high in the mix either. So for a long time when I was listening to this album when I was younger, I couldn't really hear what he was singing about. I think sometimes that's to the advantage. Some of the lyrics are still kind of dumb, like on the song Crumbs, but they are not dumb in the same playful, humoristic way necessarily. Some of the lyrics, however, are really great. The first track, Reload, is a kind of archetypal, aggressive, angry song of the kind that a lot of alternative rock was doing in the 90s. It's addressed to a you figure who the vocalist is kind of threatening, calling out, addressing with quite a degree of hate. Reload is also one of the less slow songs. It reminds me a little bit of I Am the Sun by Swans. It has this riff that's not very harmonic and quite a banging beat to it. It's kind of an exciting starter to the album. Things quickly go over to the like slower, more repetitive, sludgy sound afterwards. The second song, Filth Pig, is like that sonically. That song starts with quite a creepy introduction before this really slamming, repetitive riff comes in. And the lyrics are, well, I started out younger at things that people start out younger at. Suggesting, I think, that the narrator of the song, began their sexual awakening and their drug use young, And through the song, you hear him singing about, how he sleeps with his eyes open and he can't understand how he can dream. It's like the perspective of a person traumatized by their life. The third song, Lava, continues the theme. It seems to be a song about drug addiction, about the two sides of taking heroin. At this time, Jurgensen was very addicted to heroin, had a terrible drug issue, which kind of broke the band up. And the song this one is so heavy. It has this incredible sample that sounds like maybe it's a preacher or something saying be healed in the choruses, and then you have Jurgensen's kind of just single note vocal coming in contrast to that. It's a really, really great, quite strange track. Later in the album, there are more melodic sounds that creep in, almost like some prog influences. The track Game Show, which is another very sad, depressing song, but it has this descending guitar riff on the chorus that really reminds me of The Wall by Pink Floyd, like the riffs on the second half of that album. The song The Fall, again, is more kind of melodic, more open. That's a really great track. And then the second from last track is Lay Lady Lay. It's a cover of the Bob Dylan song. It's got this really great rhythm in the verses, and apparently the drummer Bill Rieflin refused to play it and quit the band while they were recording it. I don't know if it's because he was a big Bob Dylan fan or if it was because he thought that the weird slidey guitar in the chorus kind of didn't fit with the rest of the album, which it doesn't. But either way, he left. I think he's still on quite a lot of the tracks on this album because I feel like I can hear him. He did a lot of work for Swans as well, and I kind of recognize his style. He's a really creative drummer. Either way, the Lay Lady Lay cover works way better than you would expect it to. And the last track, Brick Windows, kind of changes the vibe of the album slightly right at the end. I feel like if you stripped out a lot of the noise on this track, it could almost be by The Jam or something. It's almost like a sort of post-punk new wave type track. I will also say about this album that the production is really great. Like, it has some ridiculously intense and noisy guitars at some point. It has a lot of noise and kind of unharmonic, or what's the word that I'm looking for? Discordant sounds throughout the album. The vocals, as I say, are very processed. So it could be just really ugly and messy, but they've produced it in such a way that you can kind of hear all the sounds. So it sits really well together in the overall sonic image of the record. And the question I want to ask about all these albums in 2026 that were released in 1996 is whether or not they stand up today. And I think Filth Pig does, very much so, in the sense that nobody would release something that sounds like this now, but it doesn't sound dated or kind of old-fashioned in a way that takes away its power or its vibe. Like, it still today has this mixture of being quite bleak and quite challenging, but also, it has these really boneheaded riffs that I think a lot of bands would be embarrassed to play now because they think they were too simple, but that are just so effective in the same way as like Jesus Lizard would have these really simple riffs, but they're so effective. The drums, they don't sound overly processed or overly compressed, so you can have this live band feeling. And I just feel like it's an album you can return to. It's not like an album that sounds current, but it also doesn't sound 90s in an embarrassing way that maybe some of the grunge stuff or the post-grunge stuff from the mid-90s, is kind of unlistenable now. I feel like Filth Pig has aged really well. So that's my take on this album. Please come back next month and watch the next Remembering video. And if you like Ministry or if you have any thoughts about this album, I would love to hear from you in the comments. That's all from me for now, and see you soon.